My channel is sponsored by Geology, which means we'll have an ad from them somewhere in the middle of today's video. The things I'm about to say would get me murdered or jailed if I just happened to be born in a different country or live in a different country. I wouldn't even be surprised if this video results in actual, genuine, government-funded harassment. I am not exaggerating. That would not surprise me. And it shouldn't surprise you if in a couple of years you see incredibly negative comments under any creators' videos that happen to criticize EA. So, in case you missed it, EA Games, the video game publisher currently known for the incredibly well-received record-breaking Battlefield 6, which is currently the biggest game in the franchise's history according to Steam concurrent user counts, is being bought by a consortium of buyers for an unprecedented $55 billion. This would take EA off the stock market and officially make it a private company, something you may think I'd feel positively about, considering my fairly consistent stance on this channel that the stock market's unrealistic, nay, just genuinely impossible lust for exponential growth has sort of destroyed the games industry over the last several years. And there are potential upsides here, admittedly. There's also just the fact that a big chunk of this is coming from Saudi Arabia's government. I feel like it just gets harder and harder to be an ethical consumer of video games. We love you, indies. Also, I'm sorry my voice sounds different. I've been sick for like a month and a half, so it was a period where I couldn't speak. I had no voice at all. Now I just kind of sound like I'm about to, I don't know, sing in a jazz band. Okay, but before we get into what this all means, some more info on what it is in case you aren't caught up. I am paraphrasing an article from the BBC here, which states that, of course, all of EA's public shares will be purchased and the company will no longer be listed on the stock exchange. This is the second most valuable games industry purchase in history, right behind the Xbox Activision deal, though it is understood to be the largest leveraged buyout in history, like history, not just games industry history. And I'll explain what that means in a sec. The firms that have teamed up to buy EA are contributing $36 billion, with the remaining being financed by loans, which is really just a polite way of saying that EA is now, or almost set to be, in about $20 billion worth of debt. And because it's leveraged, it's like debt against itself. We'll get to it. EA boss Andrew Wilson said this was a powerful recognition of the firm's work, which I find to be at least a little funny, because it's really just him pretending that this isn't because many AAAs are like desperate right now because, again, investors are abandoning the games industry largely for AI. In January of this year, EA spent a day as the single biggest loser on the S&P 500 stock market, with both EA Sports FC and Dragon Age Veilguard underperforming, and EA's 2024 earnings were down minus 11.94% from the previous year. But no, it's definitely that they're just being recognized for doing so well. You didn't accept a deal that will put you in $20 billion of debt out of desperation. Of course not. Wilson continued, "Together with our partners, we will create transformative experiences to inspire generations to come." I'm pretty good at it. I am good at it. I deserve the credit.
The amount of eggs I have in my internet-enabled fridge might mean my Sims are better off in my game.
Anyway, the easiest question to answer here is, how will this impact EA in a gamer-facing way? Most probably it'll result in increased monetization strategies being added to games like FIFA, EA Sports FC, Madden, The Sims, and Battlefield, and likely, I don't know, pretty much nothing else even coming out. EA almost definitely, as a response to this deal, just announced a partnership with a company called Stability AI, which is backed by James Cameron, of all people. They're a company that claims to create custom AI workflows that help creative teams with big-time production demands achieve big-time results. EA's announcement post reads, "For more than 40 years, EA has led through technological shifts across interactive entertainment, redefining what is possible for our global community of players." Now, this post does center humans a number of times, but also specifically talks about using generative AI, and I'll believe all of it can generate and draft and analyze, but it can't imagine, empathize, or dream. That's the work of EA's extraordinary artists, designers, developers, storytellers, and innovators. If this doesn't happen to result in a ton of layoffs. Spoilers, it will. This is a cost-cutting plan, not a quality plan. To me, it means EA games, many of which have already launched with a ton of bugs, are going to decrease in technical quality significantly. We could also maybe see EA try to branch out into the still fairly profitable areas of gaming that haven't quite taken over in the West, like gacha. And again, certainly likely more of a push into global mobile markets. But yeah, My biggest guess here is that until that debt is paid off, they play it extremely safe. So it's FIFA, Madden, and mobile games for all. FIFA is still EA's biggest hit by a pretty dramatic margin, actually. Then it's The Sims, Need for Speed, Madden, Apex Legends, Battlefield, and then Bejeweled. Yes, friendly reminder that EA Games owns Bejeweled. That said, EA makes a lot of money. In 2024, EA profited 7.5 billion. In 2023, 7.4 billion. The year before that, it was 6.5, 5.6, 5.5. You get the idea. It's kind of gradual, stable line of billions before that. Basically, it's not actually going to take EA's new owners that long to pay off this debt. The company makes so much goddamn money. And once that part is done, I would reassess their approach to the market. I'm very interested to see what happens here. Private owners need to make money consistently, of course, but they don't need to appease an impossible market. They want profit. They don't need endlessly exponential profit. This would actually force EA to treat gamers as consumers rather than the stock market again, which is not how it currently is. Right now, the stock market is EA's number one customer. If you go private, that isn't the case anymore. So I feel good about that. Speaking of things I feel good about, let's hear from today's sponsor, Geology. When I first started to try to treat my skin properly, I got very overwhelmed. There are so many products and so many people trying to sell you on different ingredients and different things, and it is extremely overwhelming. Geology fixes all that. Geology is a 41-time award-winning brand in skincare, hair care, and body care. They've also racked up over 10,000 five-star reviews, and it's very easy to see why. They have cracked the code on something most companies haven't, which is making skincare easy. There is no one-size-fits-all with skincare, so Geology starts off with a quick 60-second quiz to figure out what your concerns or things you want to address are with your skin. I personally am very oily, but I found Geology's face wash specifically to be really good with that. Plus, it's a sensitive formula, so it doesn't overly dry me out and leave me all sore. Their tone control morning cream has also been really lovely for me because it's really lightweight. It's really easy for people with oily skin to feel heavy, and this does not do that. Once you take the quiz, they design a custom routine using dermatologist-grade products and proven ingredients and ship it straight to your door. They even have numbers for the order to use the things in, which goes such a long way. That by itself is a confusing nightmare. Geology literally numbers things 1, 2, 3, 4, so you know what order to apply in. Also, love this tiny ingredients list. This is 3 things. Mwah.
So go to geolog.ie/CharaLanahZard100 or scan the QR code that's on the screen right now and use code CharaLanahZard to grab your personalized skincare trial set for 100% off. Plus, you'll get a free gift and up to 50% off on add-ons.
So, PC Gamer put together a really great piece about the potentially very negative private equity part of all of this. I'm not overly concerned about this, but I will leave a link in the description to where you can get more info because it's a super interesting article, very, very detailed. But the short of it is about how private equity firms have a kind of sinister reputation since they have a tendency to cannibalize their own acquisitions, meaning they chase profit at the expense of their workforce. Like they just fire everybody because the leverage in these deals actually comes from the company they're buying and not from the equity firms making the purchase. Does that make sense? So if they can't pay off the debt according to whatever terms they have from lenders, EA will pay the price, basically. Like how if you can't pay off a debt, collectors might come for your house or your car. Basically, they'd go for EA. That's in the deal itself rather than from the investment companies. This is the most negative possible outcome, and it is rightfully scary for sure. But I do not expect this to happen here considering Saudi Arabia's current economic strategy. I do not believe they're planning to just rapidly drain EA's money and close the company. They both don't need that, and it doesn't align with their goals at all. EA's longevity aligns with their goals, if anything. On that note, it's also not just Saudi Arabia. The investors involved here are private equity fund Silver Lake, an American company who also have stakes in Airbnb, Twitter, Waymo, and Expedia, for starters. The second is investment firm Affinity Partners, also American and run by Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And it largely focuses on American and Israeli startups. Affinity Partners has not yet delivered any profit to their investors. And in a bizarre way, the biggest investor in Affinity Partners is actually also the third organization that's buying EA, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. Affinity Partners being funded by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, we'll call it the PIF from now on, is actually considered to be a potentially enormous ethical breach by itself, even though this video isn't about that, because Kushner acted as a senior advisor during Trump's first term and was a huge defender of the Saudi crown prince during that time. Basically, the man who owns Affinity Fund used to be part of the US government and hugely defended Saudi Arabia while in office, then took tons of money from Saudi Arabia to kickstart his company and is now in partnership with Saudi Arabia to buy EA. There's like US government corruption involved here, potentially. Like, this is not just EA being sold. There's so much more to this particular deal. So let's get to the PIF, shall we? It's a state-owned fund literally owned by the Saudi Arabian government and is among the largest sovereign wealth funds in the entire world. The fund mostly operates within Saudi Arabia with a focus on Saudi businesses that have close relationships with the ruling family. And the PIF has already funded a bunch of other video game companies. They acquired Niantic, the company you probably know for Pokemon Go, and the EVO Championship Series, the ESL Faceit esports orgs, plus they have stakes in companies like Activision, Blizzard, Capcom, Embracer Group, Nintendo, and Take-Two Interactive. They are already all up in our shit. They also own Premier League football club Newcastle United. They've had significant stakes in Uber, Tesla, Live Nation, Boeing, Meta, Disney, Citibank, Bank of America, BP, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And this is just the stuff that we know about. The PIF is actually pretty broadly considered to be one of the least transparent investment funds in the entire world. Now, if you'll allow me a very important tangent. We do know that in 2018, a Saudi journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, was murdered inside of a Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. Jamal was known for journalism that spoke against the Saudi regime and its frequent human rights violations. He'd actually fled the country and lived in the US for several years. Allegedly, the House of Saud had tried to convince him to return to Saudi Arabia to resume his services as a media advisor to the royal court, but he declined, figuring that it was a trick to have him return to the country and subsequently be thrown into prison. But Khashoggi was trying to get married to his Turkish fiancée at the time. He had to get paperwork from the Saudi government confirming that he was no longer married to his ex-wife to ensure he could marry his new one. He tried to do as much as he could inside of the US, but was eventually lured to the Saudi consulate in Turkey, where his fiancée was at the time. He initially showed up unannounced. On the 28th of September 2018, he instructed his fiancée to contact Turkish authorities if he didn't come out of the consulate, as he was worried about being kidnapped and taken back to Saudi Arabia. But he did come out. In fact, he made comments about how warmly they treated him. He praised their hospitality and was told to return on October 2nd to get his paperwork. On October 2nd, 2018, the day of his appointment, CCTV footage showed Saudi agents entering the consulate. Khashoggi arrived about an hour later, accompanied by his fiancée, whom he gave his cell phone to while she waited outside for him. He entered the consulate just after 1 p.m. The consulate actually closed at 3:30 p.m., but Khashoggi still hadn't come out. And then it was 4 p.m. and he still hadn't come out. So his fiancée contacted authorities, reported him missing, and the police started an investigation. The immediate response from the Saudi government was that he left the consulate via the back entrance. The Turkish government said he was still inside. Unfortunately, difficult to check since allegedly Turkish authorities claimed that the security camera footage from that day was removed from the consulate and that the Turkish staff working there were told to take an abrupt holiday on October 2nd. On October 22nd, CNN aired CCTV footage given to them from Turkish authorities who were understood to be concerned about actually accusing Saudi Arabia of having done anything, because if they were to admit that something bad had happened, it would require some sort of serious response, and that would be bad for the Turkish-Saudi relationship. But in that footage, a man who was wearing Khashoggi's clothes, his Apple Watch, his glasses, and a fake beard left through the back of the consulate. The man was traced and eventually seen at Istanbul's Blue Mosque, where he went to a public bathroom and changed back to his own clothes and discarded Khashoggi's clothes. He was later seen at a diner laughing and smiling with another Saudi agent. The Saudis eventually had to acknowledge Khashoggi's death in part because their body double cover-up was so poorly done, but they claimed he was killed after he started a fight in the consulate and rejected any notion that it was premeditated. But it's kind of tough to get away with the suggestion that it wasn't premeditated if you send a lookalike to Turkey and bring a fake beard to the consulate with you. It's believed that Khashoggi was dismembered inside of the consulate, then either dissolved in acid, also inside of the consulate, or potentially removed in pieces stuffed inside the Saudi hit squad suitcases. There are also theories that the body was instead disposed of by being cremated in a recently constructed extra-large oven at the Saudi Consulate General's residence, which journalists at Al Jazeera suggest was likely purpose-built to dispose of Khashoggi's remains. Part of the reason we don't really know is because evidence was destroyed and the killing was covered up for as long as possible. A number of anonymous reports claim that Khashoggi was tortured inside of the consulate before being murdered and that the entire ordeal was recorded by the Saudi hit squad on tape, which then was taken out of Turkey and back into Saudi Arabia. One claim suggested he was dismembered alive, which took approximately 7 minutes while the Saudi hit squad listened to music, and that there was no attempt to interrogate him at all. They also reportedly held a barbecue party that afternoon, which neighbors reported as being a little strange considering they'd never done that before. They believe this was done to cover up the smell. The important part for you to know is that the hitmen who conducted the assassination were known to be close to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is considered to be one of the top 10 most powerful men in the world, is the heir of the Saudi crown and the head of the PIF, the company that just bought EA. The CIA concluded with high confidence that Mohammed bin Salman ordered the hit himself, though he still denies this claim. He said he had no knowledge of it happening at all and has not been charged. But again, Mohammed bin Salman, the man who just bought EA, owned the jets that the Saudi hitmen arrived on. There's also a reported Skype call that he made to the Turkish consulate on the day that this happened. A leaked CIA assessment reported on by the Wall Street Journal found that Mohammed bin Salman sent at least 11 text messages in the hours before and after the assassination to the man who supervised the 15-man kill team. Again, this is the man who runs the organization that just bought EA. It's basically not unreasonable to think that if this video were to get, 1 million views or something, whatever is enough for the Saudi government to notice, that I could start being harassed by Saudi bots directly sent by the man who runs the PIF. We might even see them in the comments here, maybe. This is a real thing, known to happen, from the guy who now owns EA. And maybe, as bin Salman tries to increase Saudi Arabia's global influence, we might have to consider being careful about shit-talking EA. I actually believe that part will happen. It will just take a while. They have to do it slowly for it to work. I'm going to give you a second story about the Crown Prince before we move on, and that is of the Great Purge of 2017. In May of 2017, Mohammed bin Salman launched a purge against competing Saudi businesses and competing political elites in what he called anti-corruption. He ordered around 200 wealthy businessmen and princes to be placed under house arrest at a Ritz-Carlton. Those arrests in the Ritz-Carlton were subjected to what is now known as the Night of Beating. People were beaten, tied to walls, tortured, and interrogated. They were largely asked about their offshore holdings and then threatened with blackmail. It was basically just a bunch of other men in positions of power who were detained and tortured and fired from whatever positions they might have been in government or otherwise, seemingly as a means for Salman to consolidate power. There was no due process, no plea bargains. Most of them didn't even know why they'd been detained in the first place. 17 men had to be hospitalized. Many more were transferred from the Ritz-Carlton straight to prison. Outside of that one night, the anti-corruption campaign continued in Saudi Arabia until it was considered complete in January 2019. As many as 500 people were rounded up as part of this, and Saudi Arabian banks froze more than 2,000 domestic accounts, with the Saudi government targeting both cash and assets worth up to 800 billion. Of course, the Saudi government claims this was all linked to corruption. No doubt some of it actually was. Surely, some number of these people were actually corrupt. I just really don't buy that that was the point of the Great Purge. It was all about power. The purge successfully undermined Saudi Arabia's pre-existing structure of a consensus-based governance among Saudi elites and gave bin Salman basically full control of security forces within the country by sidelining other royal families. Otherwise, Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy, meaning all power of everything belongs to the king. The government is regularly ranked as the worst of the worst in an annual survey of political and civil rights and has been ranked the world's most authoritarian regime multiple times. People have been jailed for accusing Mohammed bin Salman of sending hit squads to kill them, even where they may have been correct, causing a real tough sort of Ouroboros to get yourself out of. Like, you can't even acknowledge that he's trying to kill you, or they'll throw you in jail. Death or jail, I guess. Which do you prefer? Sometimes you get killed in jail anyway, so. Saudi Arabia also has capital punishment, including for crimes such as sorcery and adultery. They have a whole anti-witchcraft department. Speaking to Western media outlets is a jailable offense. Owning certain books, jailable offense. Drug charges have been found to result in executions. Executions are actually usually carried out by beheading. Saudi Arabia is the only country on earth still doing that. You can be flogged for drinking alcohol. You can be dismembered for theft. Female rape victims are often charged with adultery and thus killed. A Saudi man was flogged 1,000 times for bragging about his sexual exploits. Another man was sentenced to 2,000 lashes and 10 years in prison for denying the existence of God. Even satirical tweets that the Saudi government doesn't like have resulted in prison sentences and fines of up to $800,000 US. The Saudi government has hacked both Twitter and journalistic outlets on more than one occasion just to find information on anonymous accounts or sources that have been critical of Saudi Arabia. In fact, in March 2019, a security specialist under Jeff Bezos accused Saudi Arabia of hacking Bezos' phone. Bezos was the richest man in the world at the time, and forensic investigations of his phone concluded with medium to high confidence that his phone was hacked by a message from Mohammed bin Salman's WhatsApp account because the phone began transmitting dramatically higher amounts of data immediately afterwards with no discernible cause. There are also a couple of circumstantial bits of evidence, including bin Salman texting Bezos about things that weren't publicly known. Reportedly, Bezos had a call about something concerning Saudi Arabia, and immediately afterwards, bin Salman texted him and told him not to believe everything he hears. Saudi women specifically are effectively treated as legal minors through what's known as the male guardianship system. Women are often considered to be prisoners of their male partners or family members, and their treatment has been likened to a gender apartheid. Women are legally allowed to be abused by their male guardians, again, usually family members, and there are reports of women being starved or even being shot for things like getting a haircut. While I could keep going, the way they treat migrant workers, international women being lulled into what they think are legitimate marriages just to end up being sex slaves, trade freezes for international government officials who say anything negative about Saudi Arabia. At this point, I think it's time to get into how Salman is actually super woke in Saudi terms, and how buying EA plays into that and what it really means. Since he was appointed crown prince in 2017, bin Salman has restricted the powers of religious police, improved women's rights, and weakened the male guardianship system, lightened restrictions on gender mixing, while simultaneously still actively suppressing any women's rights activists. He has also enacted the Saudi Vision 2030 program, which aims to reduce the Saudi economy's reliance on oil by trying to focus on other sectors such as tourism and entertainment, like video games. There's only so much oil, so their reliance on it is considered to be kind of a problem. And experts suspect that the Saudi government is actually lying about how much oil they have, like they have less than they say they do. So Salman is actively trying quite hard to increase the country's regional and international influence and appeal, which is now largely referred to as whitewashing. My introduction to this was actually through football. If you weren't aware, I'm a big fan of the Premier League. It's the only sport that I really watch a lot of, and bin Salman has spent a lot of money on sport since becoming the de facto ruler. He even struck a deal with FIFA to get the World Club to take place in the country in 2034. They've also just been paying top international players bucket loads of money to go play for Saudi sports teams, including Cristiano Ronaldo and Sadio Mane. And he said this is central to the country's goal of becoming one of the world's top 10 tourist destinations. As a football fan, it just sucks because Saudi has so much money that they just swoop in and just offer so much money, and they can kind of take all your favorite players away from you, and it sucks. They've also got their own Grand Prix, high-profile boxing matches, monster truck rallies, all of which is considered to be a means to try to launder the country's reputation on an international scale. It's supposed to give an image of liberal reform and even freedom, even though human rights groups say that repression has actually worsened under bin Salman's tenure. You may have seen a certain comedy event recently make news headlines, the Riyadh Comedy Festival 2025, which perhaps coincidentally, perhaps not, took place on the same dates as the 7-year anniversary of Khashoggi's murder. Comedian Tim Dillon, who was invited to perform, was fired after saying, "Do I have issues with the policies towards freedom of speech? Of course I do. But I believe in my own financial well-being," on his podcast. That was apparently too far. Similarly, Jim Jeffries was bumped off for saying,
"It's as good a line-up I've seen at any comedy festival ever."
Unbelievable.
Now, people have been going, "Oh, how dare you go over there after they killed a reporter." That was the big one. There's been a reporter who they killed. One reporter was killed by the government. Unfortunate, but not a fucking hill that I'm going to die on.
So a lot of the comedians who took Saudi money to attend the show have been heavily criticized, including Aziz Ansari, Bill Burr, Jimmy Carr, Dave Chappelle, Louis C.K., Whitney Cummings, Pete Davidson, Kevin Hart, Bobby Lee, Andrew Santino, Andrew Schultz, and Chris Tucker. It certainly does feel wild to be a comedian with many of these people being advocates for free speech and complaining about how they aren't allowed to say things in the name of comedy, also willingly profiting off of a comedy in a country that has numerous people in jail for simply criticizing it. Comedian Gianmarco Ceresi said in an interview with CNN, "It's embarrassing to go on stage and tell jokes that if some of the audience members tweeted from their own personal accounts could lead to them being executed." I personally align with that stance, but there are also varying opinions on Saudi whitewashing. Some people believe that allowing this kind of event to take place may actually help to liberate Saudi Arabia in a way and relax their cultural restrictions. Other people say that it's just Westerners getting on their high horse and that the US specifically has no legs to stand on in criticizing Saudi Arabia when the US government has certainly also murdered people for political reasons. Epstein didn't kill himself. The purchase of EA is essentially an extension of all of this, is the point. It's why I'm not personally concerned about this deal being a means to drain EA of money and then bankrupt it. It's about image for Saudi Arabia, as well as the diversification of their assets and an attempt to move away from oil, and about profit for the other two firms involved. There are also, though, concerns that the Saudis will influence video game content. Some of the community for fighting game Fatal Fury City of the Wolves believe Cristiano Ronaldo was added to the game as a playable character since he plays for a football club that is owned by the PIF, as is SNK, the studio who makes Fatal Fury. A second celebrity playable character was added, and it's a DJ who is also allegedly close to the Saudi royal family and has performed at various events in Saudi Arabia. SNK is on record as previously having said that the PIF acquisition would not have any impact on the kind of games they make. EA said the same thing, but I don't know. We don't know either way. Again, for now, I personally don't think the PIF are going to force any censorship-specific changes. They haven't done that with any other game studios they already have stakes in, though admittedly, a lot of those are lesser stakes than SNK or EA. And the overall goal here is just about diversifying their portfolio in the long run so that they aren't as dependent on oil and trying to branch into tourism. I can see them doing what they did with Fatal Fury potentially, which is like promote or push people that they're invested in because they're associated with tourism for Saudi Arabia, like people that are in Saudi Arabia that they want to, draw people in with. But I don't think we're likely to get immediate censorship-specific changes. And as said earlier, I think that they are likely to creep this stuff in really, really, really slowly if they are going to do it, and likely not at all until beyond 2030, and likely in a way that they think we just won't notice. I really hope we do. To be clear, I'm not trying to tell you if you should or should not continue playing EA games in this video or anything along those lines. As is with all things, what you do with this information is your call. Ethical consumption is virtually impossible at this point. You draw the lines where you wish to draw them. That's all any of us can really do. My goal here was just to give you a big breakdown of these often rushed talking points. The picture is just much bigger than how video games might change. The AAA side of the industry has gotten so big and so profitable that at this point it's relevant to international governments and their financial interests. That's what we've stepped into here. People are killed regularly by the organization that is about to majority own EA just for criticizing them. It's not just video games anymore.